I never thought my boss laughing at me would lead to the biggest opportunity of my career. But when he dismissed my eco-friendly construction material as a science experiment, I made a decision that changed everything. I walked out of that meeting with nothing but my rejected proposal, and 6 months later, I walked away with their $30 million contract. If you've ever had your ideas dismissed or been underestimated at work, my story will show you how to turn rejection into your greatest advantage. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like to follow my journey from corporate dismissal to entrepreneurial triumph. The fluorescent lights of Apex Solutions conference room seemed particularly harsh that morning. I had spent 3 months preparing for this presentation, countless late nights fueled by coffee and determination. My proposal for an eco-friendly construction material that could revolutionize urban development sat neatly in a leather portfolio on the table, the culmination of my 5 years at the company. So, Bridget, you're saying this sustainable concrete alternative will cut costs by 30% while reducing carbon emissions? Richard Coleman, my boss, leaned back in his chair with a skeptical smirk that I'd grown all too familiar with over the years. Yes, exactly. The market research shows that government contracts are increasingly prioritizing environmental impact. If we position ourselves ahead of this curve, I pointed to my projections on the screen, but Richard's chuckle cut me off. That's cute. But Sinclair, this isn't some college project. This is business, real business. He closed my portfolio without even looking at the detailed cost analysis I'd prepared. Garrison Construction is a $30 million account that wants tried and tested solutions, not science experiments. The other executives avoided eye contact with me. Most of them were part of Richard's old boys club, men who'd worked together for decades and saw innovation as a threat rather than an opportunity. I've tested this material extensively. The durability exceeds industry standards by... I tried again. We'll stick with what works, Richard interrupted, standing to signal the end of the meeting. Focus on the Milton proposal instead. That's more your speed. The Milton proposal was a small office renovation, a project they assigned to new graduates. At 32, with an engineering degree and an MBA, I was being sidelined. That evening, I sat in my apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, nursing a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Zoe. How'd it go? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed my presentation again. There wasn't a flaw in it. The material was innovative but practical, cost-effective but durable. Richard hadn't rejected it because it was bad. He'd rejected it because it wasn't his idea. 5 years at Apex had taught me that good ideas died in that conference room every day. Women's ideas, especially. I was always too ambitious, not realistic enough, or my personal favorite, not seeing the big picture. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification, a newsletter from the Chicago Business Journal. The headline caught my eye. Garrison Construction seeking innovative partners for 30 Maller's government project. I took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. It didn't go well, I finally texted Zoe. But I think I just found my exit strategy. The next morning, I requested a week of vacation time. Richard approved it immediately, probably thinking I needed time to lick my wounds. Little did he know I was about to make the boldest move of my career. I spent the first day of my vacation registering Sinclair Innovations LLC. By day 3, I had set up meetings with 2 former colleagues who had left Apex over the years, frustrated by the same resistance to fresh ideas. "You're really doing this?" asked Marcus, a brilliant structural engineer who now taught at Northwestern. "I am, and I want you as a consultant," I replied, sliding a contract across the table at the cafe where we met. He raised an eyebrow. "You don't even have any clients yet." "I will." I showed him the Garrison Construction announcement. "I'm going after the big one." Marcus laughed, but he signed the contract. So did Elena, an environmental compliance expert who had been my mentor when I first joined Apex. My apartment became our headquarters. We refined my original proposal, making it even more compelling, backed by Marcus's additional structural tests and Elena's regulatory expertise. We worked around the clock, fueled by a shared belief that we were creating something that mattered. On day 6 of my vacation, dressed in my most confident suit, I walked into the Garrison Construction headquarters without an appointment. "I'd like to speak with Diane Garrison," I told the receptionist. The woman looked at me like I'd asked to see the president. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have a proposal that will save her company millions while winning them that government contract everyone's talking about." I was fully prepared to be escorted out, but sometimes audacity pays off. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Diane Garrison herself, a formidable woman in her 60s who had built her company from the ground up. "You have 5 minutes," she said, checking her watch. I opened my portfolio, the same one Richard had dismissed, and began my pitch. This time there was no interruption, no patronizing smile, just sharp questions that showed she was actually listening. 5 minutes turned into 30. 30 minutes turned into an invitation to return the next day with my team for a full presentation. As I left the building, my phone rang. It was Richard. "Vacation's over, Sinclair. We need you back in the office tomorrow. The Milton project needs attention." I paused before answering, savoring the moment. "I'm afraid I won't be coming back, Richard. I'm resigning, effective immediately." "What? Where are you going?" The shock in his voice was palpable. "To start something new," I replied. "Something that works." I hung up, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders as I hailed a cab to prepare for the most important presentation of my life. The following morning, Marcus, Elena, and I arrived at Garrison Construction an hour early. We set up in their sleek conference room, triple-checking our materials and rehearsing our responses to potential questions. "What if they ask about our company's track record?" Marcus whispered nervously. "We've existed for exactly 6 days. Then we emphasize our individual expertise," I replied, straightening my blazer. "Between the 3 of us, we have over 30 years of industry experience." When Diane Garrison entered, she wasn't alone. With her was a team of executives and engineers, all carrying notepads and expressions of healthy skepticism. I recognized that look. It was the same one I'd faced at Apex countless times. But today felt different. Today, I wasn't asking for permission to be innovative. I was offering a solution they needed. "Ms. Sinclair," Diane began, "you made some bold claims yesterday. We're here to see if you can back them up." For the next 2 hours, we presented our sustainable concrete alternative in excruciating detail. Marcus explained the structural integrity tests. Elena covered the environmental compliance advantages, and I tied it all together with cost projections and implementation timelines. When we finished, there was silence. Then a man at the end of the table, who I later learned was Garrison's head of engineering, spoke up. "This material, you're saying it's 30% lighter but has the same load-bearing capacity as traditional concrete." "Actually," I replied, "in stress tests, it outperformed traditional concrete by 12%. More questions followed, each more technical than the last. We answered them all. We had done our homework. We knew this material inside and out because it wasn't just a proposal anymore. It was our future. After the barrage of questions, Diane asked everyone else to leave the room. Only she and I remained. "Bridget, your proposal is impressive," she said, her tone serious. "But I need to know something. Why isn't Apex pitching this to me? Why are you doing this on your own?" I considered my answer carefully. I could have taken the easy route, complained about Richard, painted Apex as the villain. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. "Apex is a great company with a traditional approach," I said diplomatically. "They excel at what they know. But this material represents a new direction that requires a dedicated focus they weren't prepared to give it. I believe in it enough to stake my career on it." Diane studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, here's where we stand. We're interested, but we need proof this works on a larger scale than your lab tests. We have a small community center project starting next month. It's not part of the government contract, but if your material performs as promised there, we'll consider it for the larger project." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was a chance, a real one. "When can we start?" I asked. 2 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Former colleagues from Apex had heard about my departure and wanted details. Industry contacts were curious about my new venture. But the call that stood out came from an unexpected source. "Ms. Sinclair, this is James Wilson from the Department of Urban Development." My heart skipped a beat. The government contract that Garrison was bidding on came through his department. "I understand you're working with Garrison Construction on an innovative building material," he continued. "We're very interested in sustainable solutions for our upcoming projects. Would you be available to discuss this directly with our committee?" After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment-turned-office. Elena and Marcus looked at me expectantly. "We need to hire more people," I finally said, "and find a real office. Things are about to get busy." Within 3 weeks, Sinclair Innovations grew from 3 to 8 people. We rented a small office space in downtown Chicago and worked around the clock, preparing for both the Garrison Community Center project and the meeting with the Urban Development Committee. The community center became our proving ground. Every pore of our eco-concrete was meticulously documented. Every test was photographed and analyzed. We were creating a case study in real time, and the results were even better than our projections. "The curing time is faster than we estimated," Marcus reported one evening, looking up from his laptop with an expression of disbelief. "We're going to finish the foundation a week ahead of schedule." News of our progress spread through the industry. I started receiving emails from other construction companies interested in our material. But we stayed focused on the Garrison project. It was our gateway to something bigger. 6 weeks after leaving Apex, I found myself driving past their office building on my way to meet with the Urban Development Committee. I glimpsed Richard through the window of his corner office, phone pressed to his ear, looking as important as ever. For a brief moment, I wondered if he knew what I was building, if he regretted dismissing my idea so casually. Then I refocused on the road ahead. The past wasn't where my energy belonged anymore. At the Department of Urban Development, I presented our material to a room full of government officials and engineers. This time, I wasn't nervous. I had proof now, not just lab tests, but a real building taking shape with our eco-concrete as its foundation. "The environmental impact reduction is impressive," noted one committee member. "But what about long-term maintenance costs?" "Our projections show a 22% reduction in maintenance requirements over the first decade," I answered confidently. "The material is less susceptible to water damage and temperature fluctuations, which are the primary causes of concrete degradation." By the end of the meeting, it was clear the committee was impressed. As I was leaving, James Wilson pulled me aside. "Off the record, Ms. Sinclair, your timing couldn't be better. There's a major push from the top to prioritize sustainable building practices in all government contracts. Your material could be exactly what we're looking for." On my drive back to our office, I called Diane Garrison. "The community center is ahead of schedule," I told her. "And I just met with the Urban Development Committee. They're very interested in our material for future projects." "I know," she replied. "James Wilson called me immediately after your meeting. Bridget, I think it's time we discussed how Sinclair Innovations and Garrison Construction can partner on the full government contract." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by my apartment window, looking at the Chicago skyline, thinking about how much had changed in just 6 weeks. I had walked away from security into complete uncertainty, armed with nothing but belief in my idea and my abilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Heard a rumor Apex is scrambling to develop their own eco-friendly building material. Too little? Too late?" I smiled and typed back. They had their chance. 3 months after my hasty exit from Apex Solutions, Sinclair Innovations had grown to 15 employees. We'd moved to a larger office space overlooking the Chicago River, and our partnership with Garrison Construction was flourishing. The community center was nearly complete, coming in under budget and ahead of schedule. More importantly, it had become a showcase for our eco-concrete, attracting attention from architects and builders across the Midwest. But success rarely goes unchallenged. "Bridget, you need to see this," Elena said one morning, placing a tablet on my desk. It was open to a press release from Apex Solutions announcing their new green build material, a sustainable concrete alternative that sounded suspiciously similar to ours. They're going after the same government contract, Elena continued, scrolling to show me more details. And Richard Coleman is quoted saying they've been developing this for years. I felt a surge of anger but pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for emotions. It was time for strategy. What do we know about their material? I asked, scanning the press release for technical specifications. Not much yet. They're being vague about the composition and performance metrics. I nodded slowly. Because they don't have any. They're rushing to catch up. That afternoon, I received a call from James Wilson at Urban Development. Ms. Sinclair, I wanted to give you a heads up. The department has decided to hold a formal evaluation of sustainable building materials before awarding the contract. Your company and Apex Solutions will both be presenting in 2 weeks. My stomach tightened. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, I called an emergency meeting with our team. We gathered in our conference room, a far cry from Apex's polished space, but filled with an energy and determination you couldn't manufacture. Apex is trying to undercut us with a copycat product, I explained. They've convinced Urban Development to hold a bake-off before awarding the contract. Can they even have a working product this quickly? Marcus asked, frowning. Probably not a good one, I replied. But Richard Coleman has connections. He doesn't need the best product. He just needs to create enough doubt about ours. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. We were a new company going head-to-head with an established firm that had resources and relationships we couldn't match. So what's our play? Asked Tara, our newest engineer. We double down on what makes our material unique, I said, moving to the whiteboard. Apex can rush a similar concept, but they can't replicate our test data overnight. We have real-world application at the community center. We have months of refinement they don't. For the next 2 weeks, we worked around the clock. We compiled comprehensive data from the community center project, created comparative analyses showing how our material outperformed traditional concrete across multiple metrics, and prepared demonstrations that would make the benefits tangible to the committee. The night before the presentation, I received an unexpected visitor at our office. Everyone else had gone home, but I was still fine-tuning our presentation when the security desk called up. Ms. Sinclair, there's a Diane Garrison here to see you. Minutes later, Diane stepped off the elevator, looking as formidable as ever in a tailored suit despite the late hour. Working late? She asked, glancing around our office. Big day tomorrow, I replied, offering her a seat in my small office. That's why I'm here. She sat down, fixing me with an intense gaze. I heard something today that concerns me. Richard Coleman has been meeting with committee members privately, emphasizing Apex's long-standing relationships and implying your material hasn't been properly vetted. My jaw tightened. That's not surprising. No, but this might be. He's also suggesting that your eco-concrete is actually based on research you conducted while employed at Apex, which would make it their intellectual property. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's completely false. I developed the core concept before I even joined Apex, and all the refinements were done after I left. Diane nodded. I believe you, but perception matters in these situations. You need to be prepared to address this tomorrow. After she left, I called Marcus and Elena, despite the late hour. We needed to adjust our strategy. The next morning, I arrived at the Department of Urban Development building an hour early, my team in tow with our materials and demonstrations. In the lobby, I spotted Richard Coleman with his Apex contingent, looking confident as ever in an expensive suit. Our eyes met across the marble floor. He smirked and walked over. Bridget, bold move, stealing company research for your little startup. His voice was low, meant only for me. I met his gaze steadily. We both know that's not what happened, Richard. But I understand why you're worried. It's hard competing with real innovation when all you have is a hasty imitation. His expression hardened. We'll see who the committee believes, a respected industry leader or a disgruntled ex-employee with a grudge. You're right. We will see. Inside the presentation room, The committee members sat along a long table, expressions neutral as both teams set up. Apex would present first, followed by Sinclair Innovations. Richard's presentation was polished and professional, exactly what you'd expect from a company of their size and reputation. Their green build material sounded impressive on paper: reduced carbon footprint, competitive pricing, familiar application methods. But I noticed something crucial. They presented virtually no hard data on performance, focusing instead on theoretical benefits and computer models. When it was our turn, I began differently than planned. Before I discuss our material, I'd like to address something important. It's been suggested that our eco-concrete is based on research conducted at Apex Solutions. This is categorically false. I distributed folders to each committee member. These documents show the evolution of our material, including my original concept notes predating my employment at Apex, and the significant innovations we've made since forming Sinclair Innovations. You'll also find notarized statements from independent experts who have verified our development timeline. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I hadn't expected the accusation, but I had always been meticulous about documentation, a habit that was now paying off. With that addressed, I moved into our technical presentation. Unlike Apex, we had comprehensive data from both lab tests and the community center project. We showed time-lapse videos of our material's performance under various conditions, stress test results that exceeded industry standards, and detailed cost analyses. But perhaps most compelling, I said toward the end, is that you don't have to take our word for it. The Garrison Community Center is open for inspection. You can see our material in action, speak to the construction team that worked with it, and verify everything we've presented today. As we concluded, the difference between the presentations was stark. Apex had promises. We had proof. After both teams finished, James Wilson thanked us and announced the committee would make their decision within a week. As we packed up our materials, I noticed several committee members examining our documentation with interest. Outside the building, Diane Garrison was waiting by her car. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think we made our case," I replied. "But Richard has influence." She nodded thoughtfully. "Influence matters, but so does integrity. And from what my sources tell me, you just showed a lot more of the latter." A week later, our office erupted in celebration when we received the news. Sinclair Innovations, in partnership with Garrison Construction, had been awarded the primary role in the $30 million government contract. Apex would receive a smaller, secondary portion focused on traditional materials for non-structural elements. As champagne flowed and my team celebrated, I stepped away to take a call from James Wilson. "Congratulations, Ms. Sinclair," he said. "The committee was impressed not just by your material, but by your transparency and evidence-based approach." "Thank you. This means a lot to us." "There's something else you should know," he added. "Several committee members were concerned by the similarity between your material and Apex's proposal, given the timing. They requested an independent analysis." My heart raced. "And?" "The analysis concluded that Apex's green build is significantly different from your eco-concrete in composition, and notably inferior in performance metrics. In layman's terms, it appears to be a hastily developed alternative rather than the result of years of research as they claimed." After hanging up, I rejoined the celebration. A weight lifted from my shoulders. We hadn't just won a contract. We'd earned it on the strength of our innovation and integrity. Later that evening, as the office quieted and most of the team headed out to continue the celebration at a nearby restaurant, I sat at my desk reflecting on the journey from that dismissive meeting at Apex to today's victory. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations. You deserved the win. Richard." I stared at the message, surprised by the unexpected acknowledgement. Then I set my phone down without replying. Some bridges didn't need to be rebuilt. Instead, I gathered my things and headed to join my team. The past was settled. It was time to focus on building the future, one innovative project at a time. 1 year after walking out of Apex Solutions, I stood on the construction site of what would become the Westside Community Hub. the flagship project of our government contract. The morning sun glinted off the partially completed structure, where workers poured our eco-concrete for the final section of the main building. "On schedule and under budget," said Diane Garrison, standing beside me in a hard hat that matched mine. "The committee is impressed." "So am I," I admitted, watching our material being smoothed into place. "With everyone here." In 12 months, Sinclair Innovations had grown from a desperate gamble to a company of 32 employees with a portfolio of projects extending beyond the government contract. Our eco-concrete had been featured in architectural magazines, sustainability conferences, and was currently being evaluated for use in projects across the country. The Urban Development Committee wants to use this as a case study for future green building initiatives, Diane continued. "They're bringing a delegation next month to tour the site." "We'll be ready," I promised. Back at our office, now occupying an entire floor in a downtown building, I found Marcus and Elena in animated discussion with our research team. The whiteboard was covered with chemical formulas and material property calculations. "Breakthrough?" I asked, setting down my hard hat. Elena grinned. "Potentially. We think we can reduce the curing time by another 15% without compromising strength. That would make us even more competitive for time-sensitive projects," Marcus added. This was what I'd always wanted at Apex, a culture of continuous innovation, where good ideas were developed rather than dismissed. We had created an environment where people felt valued for their creativity and expertise. My assistant poked her head in. "Bridget, the journalist from Architecture Today, is here for your interview." The magazine was doing a feature on women leading innovation in construction and engineering. 5 years ago, such recognition would have seemed impossible. Now, it was just another milestone in a journey that kept exceeding my expectations. After the interview, I had a lunch meeting with potential investors interested in helping us expand nationally. Walking through the downtown streets to the restaurant, I passed the Apex Solutions building. Through force of habit, I glanced up at the windows of my old office. It wasn't my office anymore, of course. Through industry gossip, I'd heard that Richard Coleman had been moved to a strategic advisory role, a polite corporate way of saying he'd been sidelined. Apex had hired a new chief innovation officer, someone brought in specifically to help them catch up in sustainable building materials. The irony wasn't lost on me. At the restaurant, I met with 3 investment partners who were eager to help fund our expansion. What had started as a desperate leap of faith was now an attractive investment opportunity. We discussed growth projections, research and development plans, and potential markets beyond Chicago. "Your company's rapid rise is impressive," said one investor, reviewing our financial statements. "What do you attribute that success to?" I considered the question carefully. Timing played a part. The industry was ready for this innovation. But ultimately, I think it came down to believing in the value of an idea even when others didn't see it. After securing a preliminary investment agreement, I returned to the office to find an unexpected visitor waiting in our reception area. Tanya Martinez, Apex's new chief innovation officer, stood as I approached. "Miss Sinclair," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." I hadn't agreed to anything. My assistant had apparently scheduled this without checking with me first, but I was curious enough to invite her into my office. "What can I do for Apex Solutions?" I asked once we were seated. Tanya was direct. "I've been tasked with rebuilding Apex's innovation strategy. The board recognizes they've fallen behind in sustainable materials, and they're committed to changing course." I waited, sensing there was more. "I'll be blunt," she continued. "We're interested in acquiring Sinclair Innovations." The proposal caught me off guard. Return to Apex? After everything that had happened? "We're prepared to make a very generous offer," she added, naming a figure that momentarily took my breath away. "You would retain leadership of your division and have full authority over research and development." "Why not just continue trying to compete with us?" I asked. Tanya smiled ruefully. "Because you're winning. Your eco-concrete is setting the industry standard while our green build is playing catch-up. The board has finally recognized it's better to invest in real innovation than try to replicate it after the fact. I promised to consider the offer and discuss it with my team. After she left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The proposition was tempting in many ways: financial security, vindication, resources we could only dream of as a smaller company. That evening, I called a meeting with Marcus, Elena, and our other early team members. I laid out Apex's offer and asked for their thoughts. "It's a lot of money," Marcus acknowledged, "and their resources would accelerate our research." "But would we still be us?" Elena countered. "Or would we slowly become them?" The discussion continued late into the night. There were compelling arguments on both sides. In the end, though, one consideration outweighed all others. The next morning, I called Tanya Martinez. "I've considered Apex's offer," I told her, "and I have to decline." "May I ask why?" She sounded genuinely curious. "Because we're not finished building yet," I replied simply. "What we've created here isn't just a product or a company. It's a vision of how innovation should work, and I need to see that vision through on our terms." 2 weeks later, we broke ground on our own research and development facility on Chicago's North Side. The mayor attended the ceremony, along with James Wilson and other representatives from urban development. Local news covered the event, highlighting how Sinclair Innovations had created over 50 jobs in the area between our company and the construction projects using our material. As I pressed the ceremonial shovel into the earth, I caught sight of our team gathered nearby, a diverse group of brilliant minds who had taken a chance on a startup with an unproven leader. Some had left secure positions at established firms. Others were fresh graduates who believed in our mission. Together, we had turned a rejected idea into a company that was changing how cities were built. That night, there was a celebration dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. Halfway through the evening, Diane Garrison clinked her glass for attention and stood. "A year ago, Bridget Sinclair walked into my office without an appointment and promised me a material that would change the construction industry," she began. "I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've heard a lot of big promises. Most don't pan out." She turned to face me directly. "But sometimes, someone comes along who delivers exactly what they promise, and then exceeds it." To Bridget and Sinclair Innovations, for showing us all what's possible when you believe in your ideas even when no one else does. As glasses raised around the room, I thought about that day in Apex's conference room when Richard Coleman had laughed at my project. The dismissal that had felt like failure had actually been the first step toward something far greater than I'd imagined. Sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. It gives you the freedom to prove everyone wrong. The next morning, I arrived early at the Westside Community Hub construction site. No meetings, no press, just me watching the sun rise over a building that embodied everything I had fought for: innovation, sustainability, and the courage to forge a new path. A construction worker nodded at me as he passed. "Morning, Mrs. Sinclair. Beautiful day to build something, isn't it?" I smiled, looking up at the structure taking shape against the Chicago sky. "The best kind."